My wife said, "I love your brother, but I don't want you to know this," and the words hung in the air like smoke, suffocating and thick. Then, after a pause that felt like an eternity, she added, "I didn't want you finding out like this, but I'm in love with your brother." The entire dining room froze mid-bite. The ham was still steaming, the sweet potato casserole untouched. Aunt Linda's fork hovered in the air. The silence was deafening, and in that frozen moment, I realized something I had been waiting for this. In a way I never admitted to anyone, maybe not even myself. 30 seconds earlier, I had been staring at the Christmas lights my mum had hung too low on the mantel, thinking about how the room smelled like cinnamon rolls and pine-scented candles, the usual Parker family holiday chaos. My dad was carving the ham with exaggerated care, trying to make it look like he enjoyed the world. Uncle Rick was on his second glass of Merlot, pretending to be jovial while clearly judging everyone. Ethan, my younger brother, sat across the table with that smug half-smile that said he knew more than he should. Madison, my wife, looked restless, her fingers drumming the fork on her plate like a nervous metronome, as if she were rehearsing a speech in her head. I felt the tension building in the room, though I didn't know the words that were about to break through when she finally spoke. When she let it all tumble out in one sentence, I didn't flinch. She had her moment. The room collectively gasped. Ethan went pale, almost turning grey. Haley, his wife, stared at her as if she'd been slapped. My mum's hand flew to her mouth. She seemed to choke on the peppermint she had been savouring, and me. I just raised my glass, took a deliberate sip of wine, and said, "Thanks for telling me." Madison's eyes widened. She expected tears, anger, or maybe a chair flung across the room. None of that came. She didn't anticipate the calm. She didn't know that the war had already been waged in my mind, the battle planned, the moves anticipated. I had known about the affair for months. I had found the texts, the hotel receipts, the little breadcrumbs they left behind, thinking they were clever. I had meticulously documented every single one. I wasn't blindsided. I was prepared. And now, in front of my entire family, it was time to reveal that preparation. My name is Ryan Caldwell. I'm 38, and before that Christmas dinner, my life was a series of quiet assumptions and unexamined trust. Madison and I had been married 6 years, through all the mundane chaos of life mortgages, job stress, family drama. I thought we were solid, not perfect, but solid enough to weather minor storms. But everything I believed came crashing down one summer evening in July. I came home early from the construction site of family business, Caldwell and Sons Contracting, which I coned with Ethan that day. A supplier had screwed up, so I wrapped up early. I walked into our house expecting quiet, maybe Madison on the couch watching Netflix. Instead, her phone was buzzing non-stop on the kitchen island, the name E flashing again and again. I wasn't the snooping type, but something about the relentless notifications compelled me to glance. And in that instant, everything changed. The preview showed texts about hotels, rendezvous, and little affectionate notes that didn't belong to a married couple. I didn't feel my heart break. I felt my entire world become sterile, sharp, and methodical. The texts spelled out every secret meeting, every whispered lie, every act of betrayal. And the sender, it was unmistakable. Ethan. I sat on the couch for 10 minutes, staring at nothing, letting the truth settle like icy water through my veins. The late yoga classes, the work trips, the nights she came home humming in ways that felt rehearsed, all of it now made sense. I didn't confront her. Not then. Instead, I collected evidence. Screenshots, receipts, company expense logs, location tracking. I even started therapy sessions with Madison, not to reconcile, but to gather official documentation of her lies and the betrayal that had been meticulously concealed. Every session was a trap, and she walked right into it, thinking she was still clever. I watched them get sloppy over the next few months. Ethan began using the company card to cover hotel charges, labeling them as client visits. Madison left receipts in her bag. One day, she left her Apple Watch unpaired, and messages popped up on my phone before she could react. They weren't cautious. They were arrogant. They assumed I was oblivious. They underestimated me, and that was their greatest mistake. I prepared, quietly and deliberately, for the night when the truth would be undeniable and unavoidable. Christmas dinner was perfect family present, witnesses everywhere, everyone within earshot. I knew they suspected that something was up. They just didn't know that I was the predator in the story, not the prey. When Madison finally confessed, the room erupted internally, though no one yet dared to speak. Ethan's face turned red. Haley's jaw slackened. My mum clutched her pearls, tears threatening to spill. My dad looked like he'd aged a decade in a second. I calmly reached beneath my chair, retrieved a thick folder, and slid it across the table. "That," I said, voice steady, "is your buyout agreement. 3 independent valuations. Market rate, 30 days to accept, or we go to forced sale." Dad sputtered. Ethan's face was a mix of disbelief and fury. Haley's chair scraped the floor as she stood, eyes wide. Madison's hand went to her mouth. "You're divorcing me?" she asked in a whisper that barely carried. "I already filed," I said. "You were served last week. The woman at your yoga studio." She was the process server. Shock, disbelief, anger, then fear flickered across her face. "Ryan, wait. We can fix this." "I didn't mean this isn't," I cut her off. "You lied to me repeatedly. You lied in therapy. You lied in your heart." "I'm done." Ethan tried to speak. "This valuation is garbage. The company's worth more." "No," I replied. "The company was worth more before you started using it as your personal piggy bank for weekends with my wife." Mum started crying. Dad rubbed his eyes. Haley just looked at Ethan, realization dawning, and I straightened my coat, nodded politely, and said, "Merry Christmas. We'll see each other in court." The days following were chaotic. Ethan called, constantly yelling, begging, threatening. Madison tried to get into the house, pounding at the door like a hurricane. I watched from my Ring camera as her face changed from confusion to fury to despair. I didn't engage. I didn't yell. I didn't plead. I had grieved months before, in private, quietly. The cops came after a non-emergency call. Madison tried playing the victim. Officers weren't buying it. When told she wasn't on the deed, she glanced at Ethan's truck outside, a look of humiliation washing over her. Even with everything crumbling around me, I felt a strange clarity, a precise calm. Madison wasn't the woman I married. Ethan wasn't the brother I trusted. But I was still me, and I would not allow them to control my story. Mum tried to mediate, calling daily, crying, pleading for reconciliation. Dad quietly supported me. Get space. Let them stew in the consequences of their actions. In that first week after Christmas, the world felt quiet, grey, and heavy, yet underneath, something was forming, solid, deliberate, and mine. Something that would become my life again. On my terms. And that is where part 1 ends. The destruction has been revealed. The chaos faced, and the rebuilding quietly begins. The day after Christmas, the quiet of the house was almost eerie. The smell of pine still lingered, faint in the air, but the sounds of laughter, clinking glasses, and holiday cheer were gone. My home felt empty, not because I was alone, but because the people who had made it chaotic, maddening, and familiar were now absent. Madison's belongings were packed into storage, the locks had been changed, and Ethan's truck was gone from the driveway. The Christmas lights flickered in the window, but I barely noticed them. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of black coffee, staring at the folder I had handed Ethan the night before. The valuations, the buyout agreement, the legal letters, it all represented control in a world that had suddenly felt like it was spinning too fast. I took a deep breath, thinking about how calm I actually felt. Not relief, exactly. Not happiness, just clarity. Of course, the day didn't remain peaceful for long. My phone started buzzing like a storm. First, it was Ethan, furious. Then Madison, pleading. Then a flood of messages from friends and family. The text messages ran the emotional spectrums, accusing me of being cruel and vindictive. Others shocked at the betrayal, and a few taking my side quietly. I didn't respond to anyone except my lawyer. Ethan's first call of the day set the tone. "Ryan, you can't do this. You can't just take control of the company like this. You're stealing from me. The valuations are garbage." I put my phone down calmly. I wasn't yelling back. I wasn't defending my actions. I had prepared for this conversation. "Ethan, the valuations are based on 3 independent appraisals. Market rate, documented, legal. You either accept or we force the sale. The partnership agreement is clear. I'm not stealing anything. You made your choices. Now you deal with the consequences." There was a long pause, then a shouted string of words I didn't bother to listen to. I muted the call. I already knew the outcome. Ethan didn't have the cash to buy me out. Even if he did, I had contingency plans, loans approved and documented. I wasn't bluffing. Next came Madison. She had tried to come to the house early that morning, and the Ring camera captured her pounding at the door. Her breath ragged, her face a mix of desperation and disbelief. I watched silently as she tried her key. It didn't fit. She screamed, cursed, then retreated a step and pounded again. I didn't go outside. I didn't say a word. She had nowhere to go but to the street, to Ethan's truck, or to the storage unit where her things were packed. And every time she screamed, it confirmed the reality. I was no longer a participant in their plan. I was the observer. The police came mid-morning after Madison made a call claiming trespassing. When 2 officers arrived, I calmly explained the situation. Madison's pleas fell on deaf ears. They politely informed her she wasn't on the deed and that she needed to leave the property. The look she gave Ethan's truck outside was a mix of resignation and fury. That moment watching her scramble and fail was oddly satisfying, but more than that, it was relieving. Justice, in a sense, had a quiet rhythm. Even with the immediate drama addressed, I knew the real battle was just beginning. Ethan would try to fight me over the company. Madison would try to fight me over money, the house, and alimony. And my parents? They were caught in the middle, torn between the son who betrayed and the son who stayed calm. I had to manage all of it without losing my own focus. The legal battle began quietly, strategically. I had spent months gathering documentation, screenshots of messages, bank statements, receipts, travel logs, counseling notes, all organized meticulously. The counselor sessions became pivotal. Every lie Madison told, every time she swore she wanted to repair the marriage while actively seeing Ethan, was documented. It was objective, official, and devastating. Ethan hired a lawyer, of course, claiming the partnership agreement was invalid, claiming duress, claiming manipulation of valuations. I didn't panic. My lawyer had anticipated all of this. Each claim was flimsy. Every valuation was defended by 3 independent third parties. He had no ground. Any hope Ethan had of winning in court was fading fast. Meanwhile, Madison tried spinning her narrative among friends and mutual acquaintances. Ryan is emotionally abusive. He's controlling. He's punishing me for love. Her story was consistent, rehearsed, and desperate. But friends who actually spent time with us weren't buying it. They had seen the day-to-day reality of our marriage. They had seen Madison's behavior firsthand. I sent them documentation quietly, letting them decide for themselves. Most quietly sided with the facts, not her emotional narrative. The pressure worked in my favor. Madison and Ethan tried delaying tactics. Motions filed. Requests for more information. Counterclaims. Exhaustion was their weapon. They wanted me to back down. But I had prepared. I had time. I had money set aside. I didn't need to bluff. Every attempt to stall was countered by documentation and planning. Ethan showed up at my worksite one afternoon, walking toward me with that smug, arrogant energy he always carried. "Ryan," he said, "we need to talk. Can we do this somewhere private?" I sighed and nodded. We went to the garage, closed the door. His posture screamed guilt, desperation, and just a hint of fear. "Look, I know I screwed up," he said. "Screwed up doesn't begin to describe it," I replied. "You didn't just forget someone's birthday. You deliberately betrayed me, used company resources, and slept with my wife. That's not a mistake. That's a choice. And choices have consequences. I can't afford to start over, he said. That buyout money, you know it's impossible. That's your problem, I said. Accept the buyout, or we force the sale. That's it. The company continues. Life continues. You either take the money and go, or you lose the chance entirely. Those are your options. He grabbed my arm, eyes pleading. You're really going to choose money over family? I looked at his hand, then at his face. You chose Madison over family. Don't lecture me about priorities now. Walk away, he did. Not angrily, not vengefully, just defeated. I had expected that the company buyout eventually went through. Ethan had no choice. His lawyer confirmed the inevitability. We met at a neutral office. Signatures were made, checks exchanged. I walked out with full ownership of Caldwell & Sons Contracting. Ethan walked out with enough money to survive, but nowhere near enough to compete with me. Divorce proceedings with Madison followed quickly. Her lawyer was inexperienced, trying to claim half the business, alimony, even the house. But I had documentation. I had evidence of infidelity, misuse of marital assets, and documented lies in counseling. The judge was not sympathetic. The court awarded her only personal belongings, her car, and her retirement account. No house, no business, no alimony. Her attempts at deception and manipulation failed because they were fully documented. It was a harsh lesson. Betrayal has consequences. Lies have consequences. Choices have consequences. I had survived the chaos, emerged intact, and even strengthened in clarity and resolve. The fallout with family was inevitable. Some chose sides. Some remained neutral. Some tried to mediate unsuccessfully. Mom cried. Dad quietly supported me. Extended family split. But I had learned a vital lesson. Family that sides with those who betray you isn't worth keeping in your inner circle. The company thrived post. Revenue increased. Operations became smoother, without internal sabotage. The business grew stronger and more disciplined. Madison and Ethan tried their love experiment, post-divorce. It didn't last. Lies built on lies are unstable. She returned to a small apartment, struggling with retail work. Ethan moved out of state, working elsewhere, presumably trying to rebuild a life free of consequence, but their choices remained theirs. And I remained outside it. Even messages from Ethan came eventually. Post-breakup. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I'm sorry. You didn't deserve this. I didn't respond. Apologies don't erase betrayal. Madison tried to reach out as well. Her words full of regret and attempts to justify herself. I see my mistakes. Can we talk? Maybe try again. My response was simple. Silence. Blocked. Gone. The hardest part of betrayal, I realized, wasn't the affair itself. It was the premeditation, the planning, the theft of trust and resources, the deliberate manipulation. That's what cuts deepest. I started rebuilding not only the company, but my own life. Boundaries were set. I trusted my judgment more. I listened to instincts I had ignored in the past. The world was quieter, but safer, clearer. The drama had ended, but the lessons remained. Christmas, that following year. I declined my mother's invitation. Some things can't be fixed with forced holiday gatherings. Dad understood. He always did. The company continued to grow. I started dating again, cautiously, but openly. No games, no lies. Only clarity and trust, slowly being rebuilt, and in the end, the choice was mine. Always mine. Betrayal belongs to those who commit it. Healing, clarity, and growth belong to the survivor. The first morning of the new year felt different. The house was quiet, genuinely quiet, not the eerie silence after a storm, but a peaceful, measured calm. I poured coffee into my favorite mug, the one with a faint crack in the rim that had always bothered Madison, but never me. I sat at the kitchen table, sunlight spilling across the hardwood floors, and for the first time in months, I felt the subtle ease of control return. The chaos of betrayal, the whirlwind of court filings, the screaming Matchissit was behind me. The debris of my old life was either gone or firmly contained. I looked out the window at the snow still settling in drifts along the driveway. For the first time in years, I didn't feel anxious about who would walk through the door or what lie would be thrown at me next. The past belonged to Madison and Ethan. I had survived it, and now, I had the chance to shape my own future. The business was my anchor. Caldwell & Sons Contracting had been through turbulent waters, but I had always known its potential. The first order of business was restructuring. Ethan's negligence had left gaps in management, delays on contracts, and dissatisfied clients. I hired a former military operations manager, someone disciplined and precise, to oversee projects. Processes tightened. Projects were delivered on time. Revenue rose. Morale improved because the company now had structure, accountability, and trust. I took meetings less emotionally and more strategically. For the first time, I felt like a true leader. Clients noticed the difference. One after another, they expressed satisfaction and confidence. Referrals started coming in faster than before. We expanded into commercial projects. Equipment upgrades happened smoothly. For the first time, I felt proud, not just of surviving, but thriving. Even so, I couldn't ignore the emotional aftermath. I had lost 6 years of trust, countless memories, and the illusion of a perfect marriage. Counseling had helped, but there were moments when I sat alone in the office late at night, staring at spreadsheets and contracts, replaying that Christmas dinner in my head. The sharp edge of betrayal lingered like a faint, cold wind. Madison tried to reinsert herself into my life in subtle ways. A mutual friend would forward a message, "She's sorry, she's changed." Or she'd appear online, posting about growth, therapy, and second chances. I blocked numbers, muted accounts, declined invitations. Apologies don't undo deceit. Change doesn't erase history. She had chosen her path. I had chosen mine. Ethan attempted one final reconciliation effort, showing up at my parents' house unannounced, claiming he wanted to talk as brothers. Dad allowed it, knowing full well the tension in the room. I met him in the garage, where the conversation could be contained. "Ryan, I know I screwed up," he began, voice hesitant. "Screwed up doesn't cover betrayal," I replied. "You chose Madison over family. You stole from the company. You gambled our livelihood for your selfish desires. I gave you options, take the buyout or face the consequences. You chose chaos. I just want things to be normal again," he said. I shook my head. Normal is gone. You can't undo what's been done. You have your money. You have your life to rebuild. I have mine. Stop pretending we can go back to what never existed. He left without a fight. That was the end. Socially, life shifted. Friends and extended family had watched the entire drama unfold, some silent, some critical, some supportive. I focused on the ones who understood reality. Family gatherings became selective. Holidays were mine to control. No forced cheer, no lingering tension, just presence, calm, and measured conversation. The hardest lesson was learning to trust again, not just other people, but myself. I had ignored the subtle signs for years, the late nights, the secretive texts, the moments when intuition screamed but I wanted to believe the story Madison crafted. I began to listen to my instincts again. I honored boundaries. I said no more. I walked away from situations that felt wrong. It was difficult at first, but liberating. I also allowed myself moments of vulnerability. A therapist helped me navigate residual anger and grief, and slowly, I learned to separate the past from the present. Anger was useful, it had protected me, but now it was time to channel energy into growth, not retaliation. Romantically, I tread carefully. The idea of love again was both exciting and terrifying. I began dating someone new, someone honest, grounded, and patient. Conversations were transparent. Boundaries were respected. Trust was rebuilt slowly, deliberately. I realized that love without honesty was dangerous. Lessons from Madison's betrayal would guide me, ensuring I never repeated the same mistakes. The business, personal life, and family dynamics became intertwined in a new rhythm. I visited my parents occasionally, but only when I felt it was genuine, not out of obligation. I spoke to Mom and Dad honestly about the past and the choices made. Dad acknowledged the pain but supported my approach. Mom slowly accepted that neutrality wasn't always possible. The company flourished. We secured new contracts, expanded operations, and established a reputation for reliability. I hired younger, enthusiastic employees and trained them in integrity, discipline, and accountability. Leadership became about more than managing, it was about mentoring and setting an example. I found pride not just in profits, but in the people who now trusted me and the system I built. Madison and Ethan faded from the story naturally. Occasionally, I heard updates through mutual connections. She worked in retail, struggling with bills and independence. He moved out of state, attempting to start fresh. Their choices had consequences, and life had delivered them exactly what they had earned. I didn't feel joy in their suffering, just the quiet satisfaction of truth prevailing. One afternoon, months later, a message appeared from Ethan. "I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I wanted to apologize again. I didn't deserve what I did. Can we ever?" I didn't respond. Words without action don't rebuild trust. The past is fixed. Apologies are empty unless matched with genuine change. I had moved on, built a life on clarity and honesty, and I refused to be dragged back into chaos. Madison tried reaching out via her new number, claiming I see my mistakes. "Can we talk?" I blocked her as well. The temptation to respond briefly appeared, but I realized no conversation could reconcile months of manipulation and deceit. Her words didn't matter. Actions did, and she had chosen. Life stabilized gradually. The lessons were clear. Betrayal leaves scars, but surviving it strengthens judgment. Trust instincts. Don't ignore red flags for the sake of comfort or love. Control what you can. Let the rest go. Actions have consequences, and so do choices. Boundaries are necessary for sanity, growth, and safety. Business grew, friendships deepened, and personal life gained a sense of calm and clarity I hadn't experienced before. I became more disciplined, more aware, and more selective with whom I shared my life. I rediscovered the joy in small routines: morning coffee, organized projects, intentional social interactions. Christmas the following year was quiet, but satisfying. I declined invitations to the extended Parker family gatherings. Dad understood. He had his own quiet satisfaction in seeing justice and order restored. I hosted a small, intimate dinner for friends and colleagues who had supported me. There were no surprises, no chaos, just warmth and calm. Romantically, I remained cautious, dating slowly, evaluating character, appreciating honesty above charm. Trust would take time, but I was ready to invest it carefully. Lessons learned the hard way had a value no money or apology could replace. The business, now fully mine, became a reflection of me, structured, reliable, and principled. Revenue increased. Employee morale soared. Clients were happy. I even expanded into commercial development, building a team that shared my values. Success wasn't just financial, it was personal validation, an affirmation that careful planning, patience, and integrity could prevail. I thought about Madison and Ethan occasionally, but only as a distant story. Their choices had created the storm, and I had weathered it. I survived. I thrived. I lived, and they were left to their consequences. Looking back, Christmas dinner had been the pivotal moment, the hinge on which my life turned. Betrayal, chaos, confrontation, it all led to clarity, control, and growth. I realized that life doesn't owe fairness. People act based on their character, their desires, their choices. We cannot control that, only our response. I rebuilt my life slowly but surely. Trust returned, carefully, to those who deserved it. Business thrived under discipline and integrity. Romance entered cautiously, honestly, and with mutual respect. Family ties were selectively maintained, with focus on those who understood justice, truth, and loyalty. The past remained a cautionary tale, a story I would tell selectively to illustrate the importance of boundaries, instinct, and meticulous preparation. Christmas dinner had ended one chapter of my life, but it had also begun another, more deliberate, more aware, more in control, and in the end, the choice was always mine. Mine to protect myself. Mine to rebuild. Mine to live a life defined by clarity, integrity, and truth. That Christmas, that night, and the months that followed had destroyed certain illusions, but in their place, they left reality, a life fully my own, with lessons learned, boundaries intact, and a future unshackled by the betrayals of others.